In this episode of the English Hour, we'll talk about freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is a fundamental human right. It is protected in many countries through constitutions. I think it can be considered as a building block of a functioning democracy because citizens, the people of a country, should be able to express their opinions and voice their concerns without prosecution. But freedom of expression is also a very contentious issue because the limits, the boundaries of freedom of expression are blurry, are not well defined, and there are different interpretations of freedom of expression. I think this issue has become a lot more pertinent, especially with the recent developments in the US. A couple of days ago, the supporters of President Trump stormed the US Capitol. If you ask me to name the most powerful people on earth, Donald Trump, the president of the US, would be one of them. But right now, I'm not really sure because of what has happened. After Trump supporters stormed the US Capitol, social media sites started to limit and eventually suspend his account. I think Twitter was the first social media site to suspend his account, and it was followed by Facebook. And a couple of days later, YouTube limited his account on YouTube. And a lot of Trump supporters used an app called Parler, an alternative social media platform, to communicate. But then Google and Apple removed this app from their app stores, literally banning the app. And that application, that site, tried to live on the internet, tried to service its users through its website. But then Amazon, which controls Amazon Web Services, one of the most popular infrastructure providers on the internet, suspended Parler's account, literally forcing the website to shut down. And a couple of days later, I think some payment providers stopped servicing Trump's websites. And even one of his banks decided to close or transfer his accounts. To me, that is a remarkable change of events. I'm not a side to this argument. I'm not pro Trump or pro Biden. I'm just an observer. And I find what happened pretty striking, pretty remarkable. It's a remarkable turn of events. But this really shows us the power of the tech companies, the power of social media platforms in forming opinions, in shaping countries. Because literally, maybe thousands of accounts, like who were Trump supporters, were removed from these sites. And this literally limited the reach of his campaign, the reach of his messages. You could say that, well, he incites violence, which I can agree with. Yeah, some of his comments really incite violence. And Trump has also been really criticized for lying or distorting data and so on. That is true. And you can, of course, find arguments for limiting the reach of his accounts. But I think this leaves us in a very interesting position because, this person, you might like or dislike him, but this person has received millions of votes, I think more than 70 million votes, and he literally represents half of the American population, and he is being banned in all social media platforms, or his accounts are being suspended, or his social reach is being limited. And apart from that, companies or groups that are affiliated with him are being targeted. And this seems, I guess, this seems not right. There's something murky. And I think this really brings up this question: who is more powerful? Because In this case, it seems that social media sites, or generally, broadly speaking, tech platforms, are more powerful than elected officials. In, and in many cases, social media platforms have tried to downplay their role, downplay their importance. For example, Facebook used to say, well, we don't really impact the outcome of the elections. Or a lot of tech sites, a lot of platforms would say that they do not have monopoly like power. But the recent events have shown us that these platforms are way too powerful. They're more powerful than elected officials, and they control our online lives. They control our online identities. For example, if Apple or Google decided to shut down your account, you would lose a lot of data. You would lose maybe years of data. You would lose your digital identity. Or imagine being very popular on Twitter or YouTube. If one of these platforms decided to shut down your account or suspend your account for whatever reason, you could not really appeal that decision, because these are not like government bodies. These are not like public institutions. Like, they're private companies and they do as they please, but they have way too much power on our lives. They try to downplay this role. They try to downplay their power. They try to avoid being seen as monopolies, but I think they are. They are monopolies, and I think they should really be regulated, because too much power without regulation is a recipe for disaster. It's almost like a dictatorship, because in social and political life, we can say that if you give too much power to a person, that power corrupts that person. So too much power corrupts. And that's what dictators do. So if you give too much power to a politician, that politician might turn into a dictator, like he or she does as he or she pleases, without respect for law, without respect for order or constitution. And in the case of tech platforms have too much power, and there are not clear procedures, there are not clear appeal procedures, and they're not really regulated for the power that they have. So they can really do as they please, and with little impact or repercussion for their actions. And I think we are all vulnerable, because a couple years ago, maybe more than a couple of years ago, there were studies showing that Facebook could change voter preferences, or even Google can change voter preferences. For example, if these social media sites, if these tech platforms favor one candidate or one policy over the other, they can really impact the outcome of an election, or they can really impact the trajectory of a law, because they have the money, the power, the infrastructure, whatever you call it, they have it to change the outcomes as they please. And they can change our opinions at a global scale. And I think that is very scary. And it can impact everyone. And for example, in the case of Trump, this has become news because, like, he's a very famous person, and as the president of the US, he got coverage. But for a regular person like you and me, one of the tech platforms could easily terminate your account, like your email service provider can terminate your account, or Facebook, Twitter, Google, YouTube. One of these platforms could easily terminate your account, and you will pretty much lose everything. You'll pretty much lose all of your data. And I think that is very scary. That's very dystopian. And I think governments should take measures to protect the privacy, to protect the data of their citizens. And these platforms should definitely be regulated to make sure that humans can exercise their fundamental rights. Well, I think that's it for now, but as I said, freedom of expression is a very contentious issue. I think we can all agree that freedom of expression is a fundamental right. We should all be able to express our opinions, but as I said at the very beginning, it's difficult to define the boundaries of freedom of expression, because what might be interpreted as freedom of expression might not be seen as freedom of expression by others. So I think it's up to the legal experts to define it, but I can definitely say that we are facing a fundamental tech crisis when it comes to data privacy and freedom of expression. Well, that's it for now, and I think I'll see you in the next episode. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel or the podcast to be informed of the upcoming episodes. Well, bye for now.